where I was, if anybody's curious. But also, our next speaker now is Naomi Brockwell is going to talk about practical privacy in the digital world. Let me pose for this picture real quick. Thank you. All right. And Naomi Brockwell is a tech journalist and a creator of NBTV.media. NBTV teaches people how to reclaim their privacy in the digital age, and it has 1 million subscribers across platforms and over 60 million views. And Naomi has also directed and produced all sorts of other things that is just too long to go into, and she's wonderful. And Naomi is the author of the book, Beginner Introduction to Privacy, and without question, as I walk back in late, the best smelling person that we have here tonight. So I don't know if that's appropriate to say or not, but it's very true. All right, so Naomi, come on up. Thank you.
It's true. I smell phenomenal. So thanks for mentioning that in my bio. Apologies for holding this. My left arm is going to be very sore by the end of this presentation, but I didn't want to miss anything. So my name is Naomi Brockwell. I'm the creator of NBTV Media, and we are a research and media institute that is dedicated to advancing freedom through technology. So I'm going to be talking about financial privacy, which is a fantastic thing to be talking to you about at a Litecoin conference, because I just love that Litecoin is really prioritizing privacy and diving into it. That last presentation showed that this is really a priority, and I think that it should be. So in this presentation, I'm going to lay out the current state of things. I'm going to make a case for why financial privacy is essential for a free society, and I'm going to give you some steps to try to reclaim it in your life. So, what is the current state of financial privacy? It's basically non-existent in the traditional financial system. And not only that, over the last few decades, we have started to associate financial privacy itself with criminality. Now, who here has ever tried to buy something from the Apple Store using cash? Anyone? You did. I did it last night. I do it all the time. And it kind of goes like this. You walk in, you feel like a fugitive. If I have a Visa card in my pocket with a $15,000 limit, I feel fine. But when I have $3,000 of cash in my pocket because I'm about to buy a computer, I'm full fugitive mode. And suddenly I find myself starting to make excuses, right? Oh, this purchase, it's just an anomaly. Or, I earn my money in cash babysitting. That's why I have it. I've been saving up for a long time. Or, I only have a limited amount of cash on me. This is an anomaly, and I'd like the cheapest model. Like, I don't have that much cash on me. Who would have cash on them? It would be crazy. And I never feel the need to make excuses when I have an Amex and I hand it over for a $7,000 computer. It never makes me feel guilty, but cash does. Why does cash make us feel guilty? It's because it has slowly and deliberately become culturally tainted. It's noticeable in everyday shopping experiences, but it's even more starkly felt when you interact with banks and other financial institutions. Who has ever gone to the bank with a check for 4 or 5 figures and asked to take it out in cash? Anyone? Because you get all kinds of looks. They will interrogate you. They will say, you want cash? Like, oh, well, you're going to have to make an appointment for that. Come back in a week. Oh, no, we still don't have it. Come back in another 2 weeks. Explain to me, what your DNA sample is like. Give me, every job you've ever had in your history. It is a full-on interrogation. We associate financial privacy and thus the use of cash with criminality, and we've started to use language like, what have you got to hide? Who here has heard that saying? What have you got to hide? As if we need to somehow justify the need for privacy in our lives. For me, I find that use of language that's kind of snuck into our culture to be an attempt to shame those who wish to have privacy in their lives. Financial privacy has become so normalized that people instinctively think that the financial system can't and shouldn't operate without pervasive tracking and monitoring. This is a pernicious narrative that has worked its way into our culture, and whilst we take it for granted today, it's actually a pretty new phenomenon. So banks traditionally had confidential relationships with their clients. But in 1970, when the Bank Secrecy Act was first introduced, banks stopped working for consumers and they started reporting to governments. Initially, this reporting was minimal, and it just applied to what was then considered at the time to be abnormally large transactions, like the amount of money that you'd spend on a house in those days in 1970. And banks had to tell customers when reports were filed and give them the chance to push back or appeal. And even then, at the time, there was an outcry that this minimal reporting was unconstitutional. But what started happening then is nothing compared to the obscene surveillance apparatus that exists today. Gradually, the surveillance of private financial activities grew, both due to inflation and through the continued expansion of financial privacy surveillance laws. So in 1992, with the introduction of the Anuncio Wiley Anti-Money Laundering Act, it became illegal for banks to tell customers when suspicious activity reports were filed. And these reports were now filed for basically anything. The Patriot Act formalized and mandated KYC requirements. The American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 introduced the reporting of all activity of payment transmitters where there was at least $600 worth of activity over a year. We now live in a world where everything that touches traditional financial rails is monitored, it is tracked, and financial institutions have become deputized as investigators for law enforcement. Tens of millions of suspicious activity reports are filed against Americans every year, and the majority of them are for nothing more than people using their own money. Governments and banks tell us that accessing our own money is suspicious activity and will be further investigated. Instead of the presumption of innocence in the financial world, there is a systematized presumption of guilt. And while cash itself isn't illegal, there are increasingly draconian thresholds on how much cash is permissible. So in France, you see limits. You can't spend more than 1,000 euros of your own money in cash on a single payment. In Greece, the threshold is 500 euros. If you want to use your own money in larger amounts, banks and credit card companies must be able to collect details of these transactions. Now, in the United States, the Fourth Amendment is meant to be able to say that the government shouldn't get your data without a warrant, right? But there are all kinds of loopholes, like the third-party doctrine, which basically says that the government has been able to mandate that banks, payment processors, and everyone involved in the financial industry hand over your data. So they've managed to completely skirt this Fourth Amendment protection. What are the consequences of this? Well, the vast databases filled with all of our personal information that banks are mandated to now collect get leaked in data breaches. They make us more vulnerable. They make extortion and identity theft far easier. The precedent of using the third-party doctrine to skirt Fourth Amendment protections means that we've given companies carte blanche to collect our most private information and sell it with impunity. And this is used by countless entities to target us. That is another consequence of this surveillance system. And then on top of that, allowing governments to get access to all of this information is incredibly dangerous. Why? Well, because there's a reason that there are checks and balances on how much information governments are meant to know about us. Because we grant governments, the use of extraordinary powers. We used to have a saying that was, we have private citizens and we have public servants, but mass surveillance has inverted this power balance, and it is tilted it far away from the individual. This isn't how a free society should operate. So here's my proposal. We need to both shift the culture around financial privacy, and we must learn how to reintroduce it into our own lives. The alternative is continuing to steamroll towards a truly dystopian future where privacy is no longer even an option. What's at stake is so important. Financial privacy is a core foundation of individual freedom. Money is what allows us to interact with the world around us. And while things like our social media posts might be our stated preference, our financial choices are our revealed preferences. Our financial decisions provide an intimate look at who we are. It reveals when we undergo treatment in an addiction facility or hire services of a divorce lawyer or address health issues. But it's also what allows people to dissent, to have independent thoughts, to hold powerful entities accountable without fear of retribution. because it's through financial decisions that we can support the causes that we believe in, like opposition political parties or whistleblower defense funds. It allows us to flee dangerous situations without fear of being tracked. It also allows us to live our daily lives without feeling like every choice we make is on display and needs to be self-censored. Indeed, how can we have a truly free society if the way that we interact with the world around us is constantly monitored and controlled? Unfortunately, despite the clear importance of financial privacy to a free society, it's become completely stigmatized in today's world and made nearly impossible to achieve through the traditional financial system. So most payments in the modern age are electronic, and digital payment rails are completely surveilled and controlled. If you want to send money anywhere, you need to use permission systems that are heavily regulated, accessing your money only through intermediaries where governments hold the reins of control. This enables censorship of entire industries through covert government operations like Operation Choke Point, because governments are able to dictate who has access to the financial world and who doesn't. In China, it's used as part of their social credit system. Interact with the wrong person or purchase the wrong thing, and you'll become a second-class citizen. The gatekeepers of these systems have erected surveillance at every juncture, monitoring all activities taking place in the digital financial realm. So, what are we to do? How does one maintain their freedom in such a world? Luckily, there are things we can do. I'll break them down into 3 main tiers. So, we can avoid traditional digital payments altogether. One option. We could use traditional digital payment rails, but try to mitigate some of the data leak, and our information is still shared, but it's shared with fewer entities, which is good. Or we can opt for alternative digital payment rails that aren't part of the existing traditional financial system. Now, none of these options are illegal, but they have been made difficult and they have been stigmatized. But the onus is on us to embrace our options and exercise our right to privacy, because we stand at the threshold of a new era of financial history, and it's becoming increasingly important to challenge prevailing notions of how much surveillance we are willing to tolerate in our lives. So let's explore these options. One by one, starting with tier 1, avoiding digital payment rails. See, look, even in that picture, he looks so shady because he has cash, and cash is dangerous. But we can use cash more in our daily lives. Who here paid for something today using cash? That is surprising and delightful. I must be at a crypto conference. Well done. Cash is a tool for financial privacy that's right under our noses, and it's completely underutilized. So if you didn't put your hand up, just try today to pay for something with cash. Anything. Just go to a cafe, buy food at a restaurant, however you want to work it in, but just give it a go. Just start to integrate it. If you can integrate it back into your life little by little, it actually leads to a really large reduction in the data that banks and governments will get about your daily life. Again, not because you have anything to hide or you need to justify this, just because you have the right to not have to share your financial activity with thousands of entities. I'd say reclaim that right. And honestly, it feels like a rebellious act, right? When I hand over my cash for my matcha, I mean, it seems so silly, but it feels great. Because I know that this information isn't being recorded anywhere, and it's not being passed on to data brokers, and it's not being passed on to governments. It's like this private moment I have with my matcha, and I love it. I embrace that moment. It feels like a great action to just hand over that, and then that activity just disappears. It's ephemeral. It's not permanently recorded somewhere in a database. Try it out. I think that you will enjoy the improvement in your life. Now, obviously, cash only works for in-person payments, or if you use Mulvad's VPN, in which case you can literally send cash in the mail to sign up for your service. But unfortunately, most of your purchases these days will probably happen online. So, tier 2 is a hybrid approach. For example, you can purchase gift cards or prepaid credit cards with cash so that you can still transact online. These are not ideal solutions because most cards are going to have a maximum amount that you can transact, and they also come with fees. There are fees such as a $4 purchasing fee when you purchase it, but there's usually no need to link these to your identity, so they can be a great tool for privacy when you need. Now, another hybrid approach is a masked credit card. Who here has used masked credit cards or have heard of them? Yeah, for those of you who don't. So these are really interesting, right? They won't protect your payments from governments. They won't protect your payments from the masked company itself, but it will help you protect your personal information from every merchant you transact with, and some information from your bank. You give the masked company all your personal information, so the same information that you give your bank, including your name, address, ID, etc., but they at least promise to store it securely so as to mitigate exposure to data breaches, which is a big difference from your regular merchant who isn't making any promises to protect your data. Whereas companies like this, they'll say on their website, we are storing with this with the utmost encryption and protecting it with our life. At least we have that promise. The government will still get reports about this activity, but the company promises not to sell your data to other third parties, which means that data brokers aren't getting that insight into your life that they would when you use your normal credit card. And your bank isn't getting as much information about your purchases. So you will link your bank to your masked card, but you can opt for your purchases to appear to your bank as like a single website like privacy.com, or a made-up website like Bob's Hardware, and they generally give you a few options for those. Now, banks will sell your financial data. They do sell your financial data. So at least masked card companies promise not to. Again, all these promises, all these things are promises that we have to trust the masked company to uphold. But masked credit cards are still worth using, because when you use a normal credit card, you give your credit card number, your name, your home address to hundreds of merchants a year that you know nothing about. I don't need every person who runs every obscure business that I interact with to know my real name and my real home address, who might then in turn also sell that data. Or perhaps they don't store it securely, and now I'm more vulnerable because they're at risk of a data breach. So I don't like handing this stuff out, and masked card is a great way to get around that. With a masked card, you can give any alias name, you can give any billing address that you want, any zip code, and your payment will still be approved. So this protects your identity from the people that you purchase from, and you can create single-use cards for every transaction. I found it to be a really cool tool in my life. If you're just purchasing digital goods, so they don't need to know where you live to send you something, or if you're shipping things to a PMB anyway, you have completely shielded your identity from merchants you interact with and anyone who might breach their systems. Now, hybrid systems are okay. But if we want to reclaim financial privacy, we're not going to find our solutions in the traditional financial world. Cash's days are numbered, and I've lost all hope that we are going to be able to legislate privacy back into TradFi, where payment rails are completely controlled and surveilled by governments and banks. The solution is building financial systems that are not controlled, that are decentralized, that can't be shut down, and are censorship resistant. And that's the third tier that's available to us, using alternative digital payment rails that exist outside of traditional finance. I'm giving this presentation at a crypto conference, so you guys already get it. Cryptocurrencies have a real value proposition in that they allow us to make digital purchases completely outside of the controlled and surveilled TradFi system. And some people I know who'll be watching this later, they might be more skeptical about this option because there are roadblocks such as adoption. Where can you even spend your crypto? But I think most people don't realize how widely accepted crypto is, and that today you can basically purchase anything that you want using cryptocurrency. It may not be at the regular outlets you generally go to, but you could probably find everything that you want using crypto. And I think people don't realize how amenable merchants are to accepting crypto, right? I think that, I go to lots of places, and I know there are people in this room like Joelle who have asked all kinds of merchants, hey, will you be willing to accept crypto? And they often just say yes. And that's pretty cool. Who has tried to ask a retailer to accept cryptocurrency? Was it pretty easy and you generally get people on board? I'm seeing shakes heads. Keep trying. I've been pleasantly surprised with that. So I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to keep going. Now, decentralized cryptocurrencies do offer the hope of censorship-resistant money, but most are far from private, as we know. And your privacy not only depends on which currency you use, but it depends on how you use it. And there are 4 big ways that crypto transactions are tracked that I want to mention. Now, this gets pretty in the weeds, and I may skip over some stuff. I have given a 1-hour presentation diving deep into these ways that crypto transactions are tracked before, if you wanted to check that out. But I'll mention them briefly and get through as much as I can. So number 1, chain analysts can look at the transaction graph and see the chain data about the movement of money. This includes where money came from, where it went to, how much was sent, timestamps of when it happened. Now, the second is by a deeper analysis of on-chain data and pattern matching. So matching address types, pattern matching the footprints that wallets and exchanges leave when they're writing transactions. There is a huge list of things that can possibly identify and help de-anonymize a transaction just by using on-chain data alone. And researchers from Princeton released a paper outlining a bunch of them if you wanted to check that out. Now, a third type of passive analysis that can be done by looking at off-chain data and pattern matching your OSINT leaks, which is basically the digital trail that you leave behind you when you access the internet in general. So your IP address, the VPN company you use, your browser fingerprint, and that sort of thing. Now, this data is often collected through honeypot sites like blockchain explorers or through controlled nodes that track transactions that pass through them, and you should be aware of all of this. And depending on which wallet you use, the wallet itself might be collecting your data, or they might be pinging some API about an exchange rate or something, and some other server is monitoring what gets sent to it. Now, finally, there are active analysis tricks. Active analysis is where blockchain analysts are actively interacting with the blockchain in an attempt to try to link transactions together and de-anonymize them. And just a question, was my timer set to 15 or 20? Was it set to 15 or 20? Because I feel like I still have 5 minutes, but I just want to, based on thingy. I'm just going to keep going. They can just going to keep going. All right, so let's look at some of these active methods. It includes things like a demand gift attack, which is where an attacker sends a very small amount of crypto to someone with a unique fingerprint, like a specific set of digits in the lowest decimal places. Now, someone can accidentally sweep up that in a bunch of UTXOs and not realize it, and this allows the movement of funds to be traced, and such fingerprints can often persist across several hops, so be aware of that. Well, there are dusting attacks where someone sends a small transaction to multiple addresses with the goal to track these funds across future transactions and link various addresses. There are decoy attacks, which are not expensive to do, and that's where a network gets flooded with transactions in the hopes of revealing which outputs are decoys and which are real. Now, all of this gets pretty technical, so what are the takeaways? Like, how do you use this stuff privacy if there's so much tracking that can clearly happen? Well, the first 2 tracking methods I mentioned rely on on-chain data. So the less data your coin of choice publishes on-chain, the better. By using transparent coins, you're essentially waging against technological advancement. Your bet is that no one will ever possess the capacity to assemble these scattered pieces of data that you've left in your wake and tie your identity to transactions. Now, that is definitely not a wager that I'm willing to make, especially in the age of AI. By using privacy coins that don't put any information on blockchain or really limit that amount of information, you are taking a big step to reducing the amount of tracking that can be done on your transactions. But ignore those who keep parroting like, my coin of choice is untrackable. It's not. This is completely false. Cryptocurrencies don't exist in a vacuum. Privacy coins are trackable because all digital activities leave a trail, and so it is essential to learn how to use privacy-preserving currencies properly. Some quick tips. It means not using privacy coins as pass-through privacy, which you can think of as sending money into a privacy coin with the hopes of like washing it somehow and then sending it out again. Because pattern matching is a super important part of crypto tracing. You can think of it like someone briefly walking behind a curtain and then out the other side. And like just because you briefly lost sight of the person behind the curtain, plausible deniability is not a good privacy solution. Like, you know it's the person who came up the other side. So if a coin passes into a privacy coin or a mixer and then out the other side, an analyst will just pick up the scent again on the other side by matching attributes. So timing analysis plays a big role in pattern matching. If you want to use privacy coins properly, you should think of private storage, not private transactions. Keeping funds in a shielded pool or privacy coin for an extended period will make it harder to track. Now, privacy is just more effectively preserved over time rather than during a single act of transaction. And on top of that, you need to learn how to use the internet privacy. So I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to skip through all of this, but you really need to figure out how to mask your IP address, how to stop using browsers and search engines that collect things. All of this stuff is going to be used against you. So here we are. Financial privacy is under attack, and it's an intense battle. And I see people waving a white flag and proclaiming that they have nothing to hide. And this becomes a declaration of moral purity. But financial surveillance is responsible for undermining the freedom and safety of billions of people every day. And we need to stand up against it regardless of whether we feel that we are personally affected. We must not be complicit in the normalization of financial surveillance or indulge in moral grandstanding, because it's blind to what is already happening around the world every single day, where privacy means the difference between life and death for some people. And it's also naive, because laws change, social norms change, civil rights that you take for granted today may not always be there, but your data is forever. And this financial surveillance apparatus that we've built and strengthened over decades will persist. Financial privacy is not about enabling bad actors or evading legality. It is about affirming liberty. And it is not an easy battle, but it is absolutely possible and worth joining the fight. We are fighting for the future where we may not have the option of financial privacy when we need it most. So while financial surveillance may currently seem like it's everywhere, it is neither necessary nor an inevitable feature of a monetary system. Privacy in our financial affairs is not only possible, but it's integral to a functioning free society. Thank you.